Welcome. In this training video, I will guide you through the process of creating a DCR SOP and provide you with a practical example to illustrate its effectiveness. Let's start by understanding what a DCR SOP is and why it's valuable to use in various industries, such as pharmaceuticals, financial services, and public administration. The term standard operating procedure is typically used in the pharmaceutical industry. Public services often use the term standard operating manual or simply work instructions. Given a SOP, the employee must read and understand the text and record progress during their work. Reading and understanding a document takes time, but with emerging technologies, we can expedite this process and access crucial information more efficiently. In a digital SOP, the robot reads and understands the text and records the progress on behalf of the employee. The robot can then help the employee in a dialogue, telling the employee what to do next, as well as informing them of important deadlines and tasks to complete. The pensum at law schools is typically 3,000 pages a year, which correspond to 100 pages per week or 20 pages per day. SOPs are typically 20 to 50 pages long, taking several days to read and comprehend. Are employees provided with enough time to read and comprehend these lengthy documents? In early 2022, we created a DCR SOP representing an 11-page long document. It takes the user approximately 1 minute to go through the SOP compared to 2 to 3 hours of reading and understanding. With DCR SOPs, employees can quickly access relevant information, find answers, and understand requirements more efficiently. This approach reduces the time and effort needed, leading to improved compliance and increased productivity. The process is simple. Tag text for roles, activities, and rules, generating a knowledge graph. The graph enables the computer to present the SOP as questions and answers, facilitating a more interactive and engaging learning experience for users. The DCR process methodology is simple and basically consists of 3 major steps that can be repeated. First, you identify the persons and its systems involved in the process, the roles. Then you identify the work done, questions asked and decisions made, the activities. Then you make some typical scenarios of the process, the flows. Finally, you identify the behavior of the process, the rules that guides the process. DCR Solutions provides a range of tools that assist you in this process. As a SOP is a special kind of process, the methodology has been adapted. We have 2 different types of roles, the user that uses the DCR SOP in an online questionnaire and the robot that can perform automation steps such as computations. Activities are the questions, states, help text, and conclusions found in the text. We have based our DCR SOP on the COVID-19 guidelines provided by the Danish health authorities, which are available for download as a PDF document. The content presented here is derived directly from this guideline. By adopting the guidelines, we ensure that our DCR SOP aligns with the latest and most authoritative recommendations for managing COVID-19. We find this text in the SOP in Danish. We have translated the original guideline into English and aim to transform specific sections of it into a DCR SOP to provide clear guidance to the user. Upon reviewing the text, we can identify certain activities that can be categorized as questions, states, guidelines, and conclusions.
Let's create our first DCR SOP. Remember to select the SOP from the list of templates. To ensure seamless integration with DCR Highlighter, please follow the following steps. Copy the text from the DCR SOP, that is this text, into Notepad. By using Notepad or similar basic text editor, you can eliminate any formatting complexities that might hinder a smooth functioning of DCR Highlighter. With the plain text version of the SOP ready, you can proceed to apply the DCR Highlighter and begin the process of creating the interactive SOP. Let's go back here and open up the Highlighter product and align the 2 windows next to each other. We take the text and we place it here into the Highlighter. The first thing we should do is to mark the activities found in DCR Highlighter. You are a close contact that is an activity, it's a conclusion. If you have been close to an infected person, that is an activity, that is the date. Infected person with symptom is a state of a question that is asked. So this is the first state of the question you can ask. And we can click here to change it and say, what is your situation? Because that's the question you ask. What is your situation? And that question is the same as this one. It's just a different value of that question. So we don't mark that also. So we take, what is your situation? This one. So this is this one, infected person. I don't want to do that. I want to have the I also. Then we should add from 48 hours before the symptom started, that is the date, when did the symptom start, to 48 hours after the symptom stopped. And finally, the date you took the test. That's also an activity here. So we add that also. So on the right, on the left, we have the text, and on the right, we have the activities, the questions, the states, and the conclusion we found in the text. First thing we should do is that we should add the data types. So took the test, symptom stopped, symptom started, as well as have been close to an infected person. These are all date fields. So we select the data type date for these things. We can also say that all these activities or questions are something that the user should ask to, or something the user should be aware of. The situation is probably the first question. The situation has two states. Go back here in the text here. It can either be you are an infected person with symptoms. So we assign that data type here. So the choices could be you are an infected person with symptoms, or you are an infected person without symptoms. For the sake of the completeness, we ask an other value, none of the above, as the 0 value. What we also do, we basically name this the symptoms. This is the first activity. So this is the date field. So this is, we name this date with person. We name this symptom started, symptom start. We name this symptoms end. And we name this test day, the date that you were tested, that is the test day. And finally, we take this one and name it conclusion. Conclusion, close contact, because that is the conclusion. So we can take these activities and we can sort of group them. So now we have the initial model. If you just look at it again, here on the highlighter on the left side, get close here, we basically have the text, and on the right we have the models. Where did the conclusion just went there? So we can now actually test the model. So what we can see, it's made it wider so we can see it. So if we select here, we can actually see the questions popping up. Obviously, the question, what is the situation, is probably the first thing we would like to see. Secondly, you are close contact, the conclusion is the last thing we would see. I forgot one thing. I forgot to mark this as a data type. You can see the little marker on the upper right corner that says whether it is a data event or not. Everything that should be visible to the user should be a data event. I'm going to show you briefly here again. You can see it in the activity editor. So now you can see it, you're probably in your contact. Now I have all the fields. So we took the text from the guideline and marked the activities. Then we added data types and a unique short name to all the activities. We also changed some of the activity labels to make them clearer. So we ended up with this model. Our objective is to display the date fields only when the user has made a choice. So let's try to do that. We go back in the model and we just look here and say, so the idea is to hide these fields so we only can see them when we basically select something here. The way we hide fields is that we make them excluded. So now the fields are not visible. I'm going to show you here. So you can see now the fields are not visible anymore. Then what we do, we add rules to include the fields. So what we do is, and we guard the rules and say we use the logical include if symptoms is bigger than 0, that is you have responded, you've been together with the person, you include this field. If the symptoms are 2, you include this field. For these 2 fields, we basically add an extra group, we add an extra activity here, and we group these 2 fields here into a group. This group is of the type nesting. Select nesting here, and we name it symptoms grouping. It's just a grouping, has no meaning. And then we add this rule to it also. So this is if symptoms equals 1. Oops. Say symptoms equals 1. So when we test now, we will observe that when I select the first thing, I will see these dates. If I select the second thing, I will see the other dates. And if I don't select anything, it will be hidden. What we also do is that we make these fields mandatory, meaning you have to fill out these fields whenever you make a choice. And we also make this field here initially pending because you have to answer the situation. We look at the form again, and now you can see this blue exclamation mark to the next to the label when you have to answer. Another thing we can change is we can actually change the position of the label to view them above rather than to the left of the label, making it easier to read. So now that if I select something here, infected person without symptoms, I now have to choose the date. And as you can see, when I fill out the date, they're not mandatory anymore. So we took the DCR rules. There's a set of rules. We don't want to describe all of them. Here we use 2 rules. The first rules were the logical include. And you can see if we had used the designer, we could have read that whenever the user answers the question, what is your situation? If he answers symptoms is bigger than 0, anything, then have been close to an infected person is included in the model. Else it is excluded, that is hidden. We also used the response rule to make these fields mandatory. The difference between using nesting, so we grouped the 2 symptoms into one group, and the purpose was that we would like to have a clear and easy readable model. And as you can see the difference between the 2 models here, if we had not grouped them, we would have to have 4 rules instead of 2 rules. So the purpose of the nesting here was simply to make the model easier to read and understand. How do we compute the answer? How do we find the answer given the replies to the question we have? Am I a near contact or am I not a near contact? What is the algorithm for computing the answer? In DCR graphs, we use decision model and notation, DMN. And the reason is that business decisions should be explainable, and we have to ensure that non-tech wizards should be able to express business rules in an easy-to-use language. And it should be able to change and update business rules, as we know that business rules change over time. So let's go back in the model and see how it works. So in order to compute, we add a conclusion. We add a conclusion, compute conclusion. We name it conclusion. So how do we then compute the conclusion? Well, first of all, we assign the robot to compute the conclusion. The robot ensures that the activity is executed every time the activity is made pending. So what we do is that we say whenever any of these questions changes, we would like to compute the result again, because the result can change based on these values. The way we compute the conclusion is by using decision model annotation. And the input depends at least of two variables, the symptoms, which is an integer value, as well as the date we were together with the infected. So, date with person. So these are the fields or the questions that we asked earlier. So of course, if we replied none of the above, no matter what date we were together with the person, the conclusion is it's unknown, we don't know anything. If we answered 1, that is, you were together with an infected person with symptoms, the period starts at symptoms start minus 48 hours, that is PT48H, until symptoms end plus the 48 hours. So if you were in that period, you were a close contact. Anything else, if it was not in that period, you are not a close contact. Similar, situation 2, where you were together with a person that has been tested, then the period is test day minus, again, 48 hours until test day plus 7 days. You write it this way. Then you are close contact. Finally, it's something else. You are not a close contact. So far, we have made the computation. However, we might be in situations where these values doesn't have a value yet. So for the rule of, to make sure that we accommodate all situations, we add rules for everything. So we say if symptoms is unknown, no matter what the value is, the result is unknown. Similar, we put that rule in the top. Rules are evaluated from the top. So if we don't know the symptoms, we don't know anything. Similar, no matter what the symptoms are, if we don't know the date with the person, it's also unknown. So we start systematically from the top to make sure we accommodate all situations. However, we also use symptoms start, symptoms end, and test day. So we should add these as parameter to make sure that we can check these values before we actually use them to avoid any computation errors. Of course, what we could do, we could also change the expressions we had to check for null values. The problem is it makes it difficult to read these expressions. So I prefer using a methodology here where we simply say, I'm going to make this a little smaller so it's easier to read. So we can see everything on the screen. Just 1 second here. So we add a rule now, say if the symptoms start as null, no matter what the other thing is, it's unknown. Similar. Whoops, I have to scroll down here. If the symptoms end is null, no matter what the value is, it's unknown. And finally, last rule, if the test state is null, then it's unknown. So we take these things here and move them up to the top because we would like these things to be checked initially. Move them up in groups. It's easier to see it here. So we move this one down. So what you see now is that, oops, I'm going to move this down again here. Whoops, there. So you say if symptoms are null, we don't know. If date with person is null, we don't know, and so on and so forth. However, symptoms start and symptoms end. We only know those if the symptoms has been provided, and similar for the test day. So if we do it this way, we can now compute the conclusion. And for the sake of completeness, we always add an empty rule in the bottom. That's a good methodology to say if we miss something, we also end in the state unknown. So now we actually have a DMN model, and we can save that, and now this will be computed every single time. So what we do here, we say if you are a close contact, we include this. So what we do is that we basically say if conclusion here is close contact, we include the conclusion. So let's see how it works out now. So what we do is that we pick a situation. I was together with the person on the August 1st. Now you can see you're probably in your contact. And that is because that the period matches. And if I change this to another date, it goes away. It would probably be nice to also show the other conclusion, you are not a close contact. I can't spell correctly. And we say this is also the user. It is excluded. And it has conclusion. Whoops. Conclusion, not close contact. We make it a data field, label. You are probably not in your contact. And we also add a last thing here, which is basically unknown or insufficient information. We don't have sufficient information. Conclusion, unknown, that's what we can call it. And we again make it a label field to display to the user. Insufficient information. So we add rules similar to the other rules we had before on these things here. We say here, conclusion, not a close contact. We include this one. And on this one, we say conclusion, unknown. So let's test the model again, see how it works. So you see initially there's no conclusion shown. So if we were together with an infected person without symptoms, and we were together with the person on August 1st, we notice now you're probably in your contact. If we change the date, it changes the conclusion to you're not in your contact. So what I did wrong here is that I probably wrote something wrong here. Not a close contact. I want to see what it says here. Close contact, not a close contact. I made a spelling error here. So that's why it didn't work. In DCR, we also have what's called phases. We just need to make sure we put all these activities here into the start phase and these three activities into the end phase. The reason is that we would like the model, you can see now you have phases in the top. We have one question here we must answer to. So we select without symptoms. Now you see we have to answer two questions before we can proceed. So we go now and select the dates, and we see we reach a conclusion. It becomes blue. You're probably in your contact. At all times we can go back and change the input. When we do that, the conclusion is recomputed, and now there is a different conclusion. What we saw in the DMN table previously was that we actually had this information from the guideline, and we know what the periods were. We can compute it using these formulas. So giving that information, we basically created a DMN model that actually uses these expressions and say, if you were with the person in that period, you are a close contact. If anything else, you are not a close contact. So that basically, and this model, this DMN expression can actually be exported as an Excel sheet for documentation if you would like that. A DCR SOP can be easily be shared through a convenient feature calling a form subscription. DCR solutions offered a cloud service that allows hosting of these forms. When a form subscription is created, it generates a sharing key which can be used to securely share the DCR SOP with the intended users. In addition to the cloud-based option, we also provide the flexibility of a private hosted service. This can be set up either on-premise within your organization's infrastructure or in a private cloud environment. This option ensures enhanced control and privacy over your DCR SOP. catering to the specific security and compliance requirements of your organization. So what we do is that we click Share Form Subscription, then we add a new form subscription, we name it an SOP, we choose the SOP type, and we fill out this information. And we notice we have different options. Give this the Corona, and we say congratulations. So once we have this, we actually have a URL here we can click on. We can take this URL and we can open up a browser in an incognito view, and now we can actually see the SOP. So it means that any user can now see the result. So when we do this, we can, again, as before, select the period. And what we see now is we reach a conclusion. And if we want to document this, we can actually click the Close or Submit button, and then we can download the result as a PDF document. So by doing that, we can actually demonstrate that we have this one. So now we have the conclusion here. You're probably a close contact. As a last thing, we would like to test the model. So imagine a situation where you've been in close contact with an infected person with symptoms on July 22nd. The person observed symptoms on July 17 and the symptom disappeared on July 20. What is the situation? So let's enter that. Infected person with symptoms. You were together with the person on July 22nd. The symptoms started on July 17 and the symptoms stopped. Oops, I have to choose July, not August 17, and the symptoms stopped on July 20th. Then we have a conclusion, which is you're probably a near contact as you were together with the infected person in the period below. It's the same, you were with an infected person with symptoms. The symptoms started on the 11th, long time before, and ended on the 19th. Now you have a different conclusion, you're not a near contact, and you can see the period ends on the 21st of July, and you were together with the person on the 22nd of July. So you're safe. Again, we can choose this situation 3, where you were together with an infected person that has been tested positive. So this is an infected person that has been tested positive on the 16th of July, not August. Then the conclusion is you're probably a near contact. And the final example, of course, is that if you were together with that person on the 14th, you are not a near contact. So by doing that, we can see that it's very easy to find the result. Of course, we go back here and say none of the above. We don't really have a conclusion because we have insufficient information. Have you ever read a document that is hard to understand as everything is not properly documented? Sometimes it's hard to find explanation on why we decided to do something in a particular manner. It is important that we document our process so other people later can review the process and potentially improve or change it. Unless they know why the process is as it is, that is how the text was interpreted, it will be hard for them to modify the process. The DCR Highlighter shows how text is interpreted, but also highlights objects in our model that is not associated with any text. So what we can see is that all the objects with the unassigned red icon are basically not linked to anything in the text. And similar, we can also see that areas of the text might not be marked, which indicate that you probably have not included this information in the model. In the highlighter, there is a comment button that enables you to mark text as comment, thereby indicating you have read it. So what we have here is that we can see the model in our DCR Designer. Again, we can open it up in Highlighter, and we can align the two windows next to each other. What we notice is that there are red areas here. So the conclusion here, this conclusion is not there. So what we could do is we could actually add information. So we just add a little line here. So say, we decided to adapt the process a bit as outlined. 1, we added an other conclusion that you are not a close contact. We also added a conclusion with insufficient information. We decided to group the two symptom states into one group to simplify the model with fewer rules. Finally, we use DMN to compute the conclusion. See the DMN model for details. So if we add this text, we can actually click these things. So say we have a conclusion here. You are not a close contact. We can see it here. So we add another conclusion that you are not a close contact. So I can highlight this, and by doing that, you can see the red mark goes away. We added another conclusion that we have insufficient information. So we add that as text. We also have here the symptoms grouping. We decided to group the two symptom days into a group. This is this one. And finally we use DMN to compute. I don't want to do that. Let me just, so we use DMN to compute the conclusion. Whoops, just a second here. We use DMN to compute the conclusion. By doing that, we document how we have interpreted the model, making it easier for future users to view the model and update the model. Obviously, I could add more text to accommodate everything.
We extracted the text from the PDF document and processed it using DCR Highlighter. We identified and labeled the activities and incorporated date types, roles, and IDs. Additionally, we implemented roles to display relevant fields to the user. The conclusion was computed using DMN. And we included two other conclusions along with their corresponding roles for displaying them when relevant. Lastly, we documented any missing activities in DCR Highlighter. The Corona SOP serves as an online guidance tool, enabling users to find answers on what actions to take in specific situations.